Meeting of the Sawyer County TRH Committee to order. It's 10 o'clock. And can I get a roll call, please?
Jenny Chabek,
Here.
Bill Neese,
Here.
Tweed Schuman,
Here.
Stacy Hessel, Chris Ross, Gary Nathan,
Here.
Matt Dale, Cheryl Treeland, Chris Vaselli, Martin Hanson,
Here via Zoom.
Ryan Carey, Laura Rusk. You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, let's stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have confirmation of compliance with open meeting law?
This meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. All right, our public comments section. We're going to start with people in the room. Today we have Linda Zilmer. And you have 3 minutes.
Linda Zilmer, resident of the Village of Birchwood and Edgewater property owner. And I'm glad to see the framework that's coming before you today to start a discussion about how Sawyer County might address tourist rooming houses through licensing. Although I do believe that when this gets referred to committees, that there's still a role for zoning to play in the conditional use permit process. But as a licensing ordinance, if the county is going to start licensing tourist rooming houses, how many tourist rooming houses are included in this draft ordinance? Because it talks about properties don't have to be adjacent or contiguous. So what is the quantity? And in Sawyer County, anything more than one tourist rooming house is a resort. So I guess if county's going to get into licensing lodging, then should it consider licensing tourist rooming houses, resorts, motels, and hotels? Why single out just tourist rooming house? The other thing that's beneficial with this coming forward right now is it helps point out the inconsistencies with the zoning ordinance amendment that has been sent to the towns. And I'm sorry. And part of that, it has to do with these, there's been a request from the public to address accessory dwelling units. And they don't call much accessory dwelling units in this licensing ordinance, but it applies to detached dwelling units. And in Sawyer County, the zoning ordinance is inconsistent right now in the definition of habitable living area and dwellings. And it also has provisions where bunk houses and temporary guest quarters are not allowed to be rented out, whereas this license ordinance suggested that that may be possible. So there's a lot of things for discussion, and whether it happens at this committee or gets passed on to the committees of jurisdiction, I hope if this gets passed to the committees of jurisdiction, that they hold joint meetings. So it's not just looking at things in separate perspectives, that everybody in the room is working together to understand where this works and where it conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Jay, do we have folks online that wish to speak?
Anyone wishing to speak online for public comment, please raise your hand. I have Andrew Goodall. Go ahead. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I own multiple properties in Sawyer County that are short-term rentals and are licensed. I'm deeply disturbed by this ordinance here and the kind of loss of property rights that seems to be implied throughout the ordinance. These are residentially zoned properties and have legal rights under Wisconsin law that are being removed in a lot of cases. So I got several questions. Why are parking limitations being made that are different than any other residential property? Why are occupancy limits being set that are lower than the DAT cap allows for any other residential property? Why are occupancy limits being set? Why can I long-term rent to more people than this ordinance would allow for the same property. So if I long-term rent, I can rent for a lot more people than the restrictions that are on here. It doesn't make any sense. Why would this be restricted? Why would I lose that right? Is this being done to resorts and hotels? Is it being done to our competitors? Why is it just us? Can a resort or hotel have more than 2 people per bedroom? Wisconsin Realtors Association describes short-term rental laws intention in Wisconsin as a way to protect the viability of the second home and property market. So then why would this seek to reduce occupancy and reduce revenues to the point where it could hurt the viability of these properties and ability of people to pay their mortgages? When DADCAP allows up to 4 units, such as rooms, cottages, or cabins on a short-term rental license, why is there wording in this ordinance to make that up to the county to justify secondary habitable structures? Why is this being reduced from what the state gives us? According to this ordinance draft, it violates Wisconsin statutes 66.0104, enforcing us to give information to our neighbors and to our residents that the county wants to give, or wants to force us to give to our residents. And it's a massive property and business owner privacy violation too, forcing us to give all of our personal information to people. The 60-minute rule used to justify the agent that could be used to that can be used to shut down anybody who sleeps through the night. I mean, that's got to violate some kind of worker safety law that an agent or an owner has to respond within 60 minutes. They can't sleep at night. It's rather disturbing. The county notices that were sent to neighbors during zoning hearings when we first purchased our property caused a neighbor that tried to shut us down to illegally trespass on our property. And now in this ordinance—
Hey, Andrew, can you wrap it up, please?
Sure. In this ordinance, it seems like it's going to encourage them to do the same so that they violate the privacy of our guests, trying to count the number of guests on our property. I can see that happening, and it certainly has already happened. So I'm just kind of sickened by all these rights being taken away. And I don't understand why we're being targeted this way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, next I have Brittany. You have your hand up.
Yes, I will just piggyback on what Andy said as well.
Can you just state your
We
name
did
for the
have
record, please?
Brittany Gridall.
Thank
You
you.
just stated it for.
Sorry? Okay, so I just wanted to piggyback on what Andy said. There was trespassing that happened on our property when the county decided to notify our neighbors. And so I want to know if the county is going to be liable for any events that happen on our land if our properties are and our guests' rights are being infringed on by our neighbors invading their privacy while they're staying. This agent requirement is going to massively slow my response time to my guests and to complaints that come up. Because I have access to my cameras, my noise meters, my Wi-Fi lists that tell me who's at the property and how many occupants I have. All of my checks and balances in my business, my agent will not have access to, and they will just be a pass-through mechanism for a complaint to go to them and then come to me, which is going to slow the response times. If I am penalized for calling the sheriff to get an issue dealt with my guests, how many hosts are going to actually be calling the sheriff and actually be dealing with complaints in a responsible manner? This legislation handcuffs us and also penalizes us for dealing responsibly with guest issues and trying to be a good neighbor. So I would massively discuss all of these things and all the implications. I don't think this committee realizes the technology that we have in place to protect our properties, how invested we are in protecting our properties and the neighborhood. And I think that this legislation just totally will cause more problems than it solves.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Is there anyone else wishing to
Yeah,
speak for public
this
comment?
is-
Thank
This is Ben Welnack. I can't find the raise my hand. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Ben.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Ben Welnack, have a few properties. Both we live in Sawyer County and have a couple short-term rentals in Sawyer County. I feel like, I mean, I've heard the discussion and I feel like we're in the situation because we haven't figured out and haven't had processes to deal with complaints, figure out to really dial in how to deal with those in the first place. So we wouldn't be in the situation if we did have proper processes. So we're working through that to figure it out. And while we're doing that, what I see in this proposal, this draft, I mean, I see there's a MIT and there's some add and questions and that thing, but all I see is more additions without a full explanation or a full detail or plan of actually how to deal with those processes. It seems like there's good because you have rules in place or you might have new rules in place. However, we're just adding more stuff without actually figuring out how to figure some of these issues out. For example, there's a full paragraph with, I don't know how many bullet points, I can't find it in front of me right now, but notifying all the neighbors within 300 feet of the property. There's a whole detailed list and a process of doing that and how to do it, when really, I understand one of the aspects of that is for safety. So if you do have a emergency call or fire department or police department, whatever it is, they can easily access it. They have the fire number, but then they have all the details of a host. Maybe they're not local, but all the information will be on the house or the side of the house or wherever it is. Instead, we have this big, long process detailing it out when a simple sign could do the difference. Same thing with property lines. There's a lot of trespassing issues. A simple add-on list to the permitting process where Matt would check off. There's signs, no trespassing signs or property line signs that have the host name on it. Something real simple that would stop the trespassing not only from guests but from neighbors as well onto the same property. And like Brittany and Andrew said, there's a lot of things targeting the rental, but we're really stuck on the fact that we're assuming that a lot of these complaints are all just the hosts, the short-term rental hosts, when really the only distinction between short-term rental and long-term rental is a contract I write out. It could be 2 days, it could be 6 months. The quality of people that you're dealing with just depends on the quality of the host. So
Thank you, Ben.
regardless if I don't know how much time I have left. I heard somebody, but so really,
Wrap it up, please.
What we're dealing with is we're adding a bunch of things without adding the actual processes that got us in the first place. So I really take a look at that and determine where you're already missing, because a lot of the stuff wasn't logged to begin with. So that's what I had to say about the current draft. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. Next, I have Jenna.
we have another person in the audience. Okay,
Hand raised online. Jenna, can you please state your name for the record as well?
Yep. Hey, this is actually Mike Nyland. I own a property in Hayward, and I just have a short comment. I want to restate that the host community, we're open to, and we want to collaborate with the county and make sure that all of our businesses can continue to thrive. And we're open to regulation and changes that support both what you guys are trying to solve, but also keep our businesses thriving. So on that problem you're solving, I can recall, I think in the initial meeting, when this committee was formed, some list of these are the issues caused by the short-term rental industry. But I don't recall a further deep dive into, do we have data to support that these issues are directly tied to short-term rentals? I recall overfishing of the lakes being an issue that we're trying to resolve with some of these regulations, but do we have any information to support that our properties are the cause of that directly, or that it's a broader issue? So I just want to restate that I think we need to go back and understand what problem are we actually solving with these regulations. That's all I have to say.
Could I get the name
Thank you.
again?
Yep, this is Mike Nyland.
Thank you.
I'm on my wife's account.
okay. And we have another person from the audience. Please state your name and address.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Kurzweil, 16040 W West Lane, Town of Hayward resident. I will admit I'm just getting my feet wet a little bit with this tourist rooming house stuff. And I was not going to speak, but I feel I should just say a couple of things. One, it seems that this short-term rental is a business and an industry, which people have been repeating online. Maybe that subverts residential rights. I believe business should be on commercial property and be treated as such, not just, excuse me, as a residential property. Difference between short-term and long-term. As a resident, I would rather have someone renting the place next to me for a year who you know, as opposed to having different groups of people coming in every weekend. So as a resident point of view of having as a neighbor, I would rather have a long-term rental instead of a short-term next to me. The other question is, again, why have all these regulations? I think it's to protect everyone else and not just the industry of short-term rentals. One of my big concerns is when you have a 3-bedroom house with a septic system rated for such, and you have 14 or 15 people in that place, what does that do for the long-term health of the lakes or any other property? What does it do to the septic system? We don't know. No one's really studied that. The idea of the robo resort, or the idea of having someone within a certain range, a time is something new. I've heard something within 30 miles. That is again to have someone to be able to solve issues that arise. And believe it or not, having people who come to a place for a weekend or a week to party, issues do arise. And I do believe that the idea of coming up with some type of an ordinance is to protect everybody else who is not running the business of a short-term rental, not to necessarily create a hardship for the people trying to run that business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else online wishing to speak for public comment? Please raise your hand at this time.
I'm sorry, I can't find the hand raising. If it's in the reactions, I'm sorry. Oh, there we go.
Go ahead and please state your name for the record.
Sure. This is Amy Stalter, and we do have a couple of short-term rentals in Sawyer County. And currently, there are a number of regulations that we do have to follow as short-term rentals from a licensing perspective, as well as permitting, along with other things that we need to be compliant with in the application process. So I didn't want any of those who don't own short-term rentals to think that we just buy a house and we put it up, on VRBO or something. Anyway, from looking at the draft of the compliances that you're actually promoting, it does feel a bit as though we are going to be over-regulated in the sense that, as was mentioned previously, the privacy issues and the sharing of information. Someone mentioned that, our occupants and tourists are as good as, we are the hosts. And from a host perspective, we already have, bylaws that they have to, follow and things that they have to do. And in fact, in regard to complaints, I know that we already have the DNR involved, the sheriff's office involved, and the fire department. Those are numbers that I all provide to my residents when they stay. And so I guess I'm not quite clear on, from a complaint perspective, why that would be questioned, since we have the DNR, the sheriff, and the fire department already involved, as would any other regular resident. And then as far as limiting occupancy, I don't understand the 2 per bedroom, only because I thought that we were looking more at septic capacity and what the septic would allow. And I'm all for whatever the septic, no one should be overloading homes. I'm not for that. But absolutely, I am for, what the septic can handle. And I guess that's all I have. Thanks.
Anybody else?
I received an email from Cheryl. She is on the phone but can't zoom in, so she is there.
Okay, thank you.
Ryan Carey is also online as well, Lynn, if you want to indicate that. Anyone else online wishing to speak for public comment, please raise your hand. Seeing none.
Okay, terrific. Before we go on to the next agenda item, just a little statement I want to make. First of all, happy Leap Day. Thanks for coming in today to the folks that came in because it's been a while, okay, since this committee has been together. So just to recap, this is an important milestone in that we have a draft ordinance to consider. And to recap, the county board put the ad hoc committee in place to make a recommendation on how to move forward with regulation of TRHs. The committee made that recommendation. That's the document. There's a hard copy up here if you want to take a look at it. But anyway, that's the document that was TRH recommendation B3. And we asked the county departments to proceed in creating that ordinance with the help of legal and administration. And that work has been completed to the point where we thought it was a good time to bring the committee back. So there's a couple decisions that are on our agenda here for the committee. One of them is to make a decision regarding the communication to neighbors. And another one is to determine the next steps in moving forward for this ordinance. And with that, I'll go ahead and consider a motion to approve the minutes from the October 19th meeting.
I'll make that motion. Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second by Stacy. Okay. All who approve, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to get a little bit of information from the staff, legal counsel, about what they did to get us to this point of developing the draft ordinance.
Yeah, and I'll kind of jump in and Ginny kind of explained that very well as how we got to this draft version as far as the recommendation resolution that this ad hoc committee provided. Department staff then took that with the help of legal counsel as well as county administrator and kind of been working behind the scenes the last few months to put this draft version before you here today. Now, as part of this draft version, there are several, comments or highlighted portions. Some of those still require additional work on our behalf to come up with specific language. Some of those are also potential, choose your path, choose your option as part of the TRH ad hoc committee. From there, I don't know how you want to necessarily break this down or if any other department staff and or legal counsel wants to further discuss how we got from A to B, certainly jump in. Otherwise, we can start trying to piecemeal the draft ordinance out, specifically as those choose your path options that we have kind of laid out in there. Does anyone else has anything else to offer there?
Not so much for choosing our paths and that, but I do want to just take time to thank everybody involved with this, our committees, Phil and Ginny, Rebecca for putting much of this together, and our team to take the time to review all this. It's been a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of thought process going into this, and again, just appreciate everybody's dedication to this, and hope we find common ground in the end here and get the tools that we need to address a lot of the concerns that have come up over the years. So thank you again.
Is Rebecca online?
Yeah.
Hey, Rebecca, I would really like it if you could also just give some background here on your role in getting this developed. And I know we also heard that you were involved in the county's version, the Wisconsin Counties Association version, and any other feedback you'd like to provide.
Sure. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Jay did a great job and Matt with respect to how we proceeded after the last ad hoc committee meeting and with the resolution that was passed by the ad hoc committee, taking that as our starting point and flushing it out into an ordinance. And so what you see in front of you is a memorialization of what that resolution included. And some of those points are highlighted as decisions that, staff has requested be revisited. But then also a very delicate and precise interweaving of legal requirements. This area of regulation is relatively new, which makes sense because the use of short-term rentals and VRBO is a relatively new phenomenon. And the law doesn't always keep up with new business and technology. We certainly know that. So what you have in front of you, again, is a balance of what our legal restrictions are that we know of based on statutes and case law. And then also the balance of the county's interest in regulating for the health, welfare, and safety of the entire county and all its residents and visitors, while also balancing property rights and property interests, not only of the owners of and the host properties, but also the renters, the people that are coming to Sawyer County as visitors and renters. So there's a balance there. And finally, what makes Sawyer County's ordinance unique is that based on the volume of short-term rentals and tourist rooming houses in Sawyer County, the traditional or typical method of regulation via zoning has not been utilized. And so there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, again, volume. Sawyer County is different than most other counties. Number two, we already have an agent process in place where the county acts as agent for DATCP in doing its regulation. And so Matt and his team already does the regulation on behalf of the state. So the Health and Human Services team is already doing a good chunk of the work that then is overlaid on top of the county's regulation. So it's two separate paths or two separate animals, if you will. You've got the state license and then you've got the county license, which certainly the law allows. But Matt and his team are already doing a lot of that work. So it makes sense from an efficiency standpoint that that work would be continued within Health and Human Services. So with all of that, that is how we developed this ordinance. And as you see, it lives in the ordinances of Health and Human Services. It is not a zoning ordinance. And that is, that's kind of a summary of all of the long discussions regarding the creation of this particular ordinance. Madam Chairwoman, you had commented that I was involved with WCA and the drafting of their model ordinance, and that is absolutely the case. We are still in that process, and Wisconsin Counties Association is always very mindful of giving counties the greatest tools possible for efficient running of government. But model ordinances can be a benefit and a drawback because there are so many particulars in a given county, and short-term rentals, tourist rooming houses are absolutely an instance of that. So we have to weigh, WCA is weighing, do we want to produce a model ordinance that is then particularized? And at first, its position was maybe not, but now we are. And the model ordinance that WCA is developing, it hasn't completed it yet, is going to look different than this. There's going to be similar elements in terms of regulation of what is allowed use in terms of regulation to attempt to prohibit or minimize impacts on neighbors of those host properties. But most likely it is going to contain a zoning element. And again, that the zoning element or the zoning overlay of regulation is the more typical form of regulation that Sawyer County's ordinance doesn't have. And so when WCA promulgates its model ordinance, it is going to look different than Sawyer County's ordinance. And I'm happy to answer any questions about, why those differences. It may make more sense to do so when WCA finally promulgates its ordinance. But that's just a little bit of background. So thank you to Jay and his team and Matt and Julia and all of their team. It's been a very challenging but very productive process. And so I look forward to using what's in front of you as a baseline for discussion of all of the elements that were mentioned in public comment. And certainly if there are particular items that the committee has questions about, likes, doesn't likes, want to discuss, I will certainly jump in and give you the legal parameters of consideration for why something may be some way or it may be a different way. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think that's probably the best route to go is kind of go, not necessarily line by line, but at least section by section as part of this draft ordinance with the TRH ad hoc committee members and look if there are specific questions to those or comments or changes. I think that's probably the best way to proceed unless someone else has other options to go through this.
I got, Madam Chair and Jay, I got a couple questions before we start that though. Tweed Schuman, Sawyer County Board Chairman. A couple of comments, Rebecca and Jay, that I heard earlier were that something in this ordinance violates Wisconsin state statutes. I'd just like a comment on that. And then what are they talking about regarding trespass by the county? Did I hear that correctly? And what does that mean?
Yeah.
And if Rebecca or Jay, you could comment on that quick. I don't want to take a lot of time, but that just concerns me a little bit.
In regards to the trespass comment that was made by Brittany, yeah, that kind of taken me back as well. I've never allowed anybody from either neighbor or the community to go on their property. So where that statement came from, I'm not sure. I know neighbors there did have some concerns and I'm assuming that they may have trespassed, but again, they did not get any permission from me, nor did I give anything like that. So, yeah, I just want to go on record with that comment.
And I believe it was Andrew that made the comment for the state statutes. I jotted it down, but Andrew, if you're still online, correct me if I'm wrong. 66.0104.
That's correct. Specifically sections C and D.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll take a look at that, and I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. I don't have that statute memorized and up in front of me right now, but it is something that we'll definitely look into to make sure that there is no violations with statutes, obviously.
Thank you.
Rebecca, any comment on that one?
I just pulled up 660104. And absolutely we will make sure that any provision of the county's ordinance is consistent with state law. And we've done that throughout this whole process over the last few months. Lots of statutory and case law and other legal reference to make sure that this ordinance is consistent with state law. And again, it's consistent to the extent that we have the applicable law. That is one of the challenges. And specifically with respect to 660104, I want to look at this in more detail. That section generally relates to ordinances that can be placed on landlords regarding rental terms that are in more of a traditional rental tenant landlord relationship. But certainly I'm going to go back and look at this. And there was a few other comments in public comments that I took note of where there some potential legal violations were expressed. And so I have note of those and I can certainly go back and look at those. I will tell you that some of them, with respect, for example, with respect to regulating these properties or these uses as commercial versus residential. We've got case law on that point, and that's why we have to make sure that we are regulating in such a way that's consistent with state law, of course, and we have case law on that point. And so that's why in this ordinance, we are not specifically calling these out as commercial properties because the law tells us we can't do that.
I think I saw Brian raise his hand.
Yeah, Brian did have his hand raised and then he lowered it again. I don't know if you wanted to chime in there at all, Brian, or not.
Hey, yeah, that was just kind of a light hand raise. I'd like to take off. So if anybody wants to talk about map stuff, let me know when we get to that part.
Okay. If you have to jump off, maybe we should just fast forward to that portion and then we'll come back and kind of go line through line. So, yeah, Brian, do you have 5 minutes to kind of stay on here then?
Yeah. Yep.
Excuse me, one thing before we get into this, I just want to, for the sake of the committee, please put this in the perspective as we go through the document, that what we're looking for is to make sure that we feel that this complies with the recommendation that was made. That's really the primary thing. How they get it done is why we let these guys do a lot of the work. They should be the owners of how to get it done. Rebecca's the owner of making sure that it's legal and up to snuff, and our job is just to make sure that what we end up with complies with what we recommended. And that's it. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so jumping ahead, so we had some conversations, and for those that are online or for those as part of the ad hoc committee that don't know Brian DeVries, he is the GIS real estate. What is your official title, Brian?
He doesn't know.
I'm the GIS specialist, land information officer.
Thank you. So one of the recommendations that we received from the ad hoc committee previously was for notification to neighboring properties. I have that highlighted up on the screen here. So when department staff started looking through this, as part of the owner's responsibilities for notification to neighboring properties, one of the things that ad hoc had stated is that they wanted separate notifications as sent out as certified mail to all properties within 300 feet of that TRH property. Now, I do believe that 300 feet threshold was pulled, as that is other requirements that zoning has for notification of neighbors when it deals with conditional use permits and rezones. So that is where kind of that 300-foot threshold came from.
Excuse me, Jay. Where's it at?
So we're on page 9. This would be section 14.4.9, parent E. It also references as 14.4.8, parent D. I'm sorry, parent E as well for contact information. But again, when we started, kind of looking through the process as to how a TRH owner is going to send out certified mail to all property owners within 300 feet, we kind of took a little bit of a step back. Again, this is speaking specifically from department staff, is to how are we going to verify? Is that TRH owner going to have to collect all their little slips of their certified mail and deliver those to Matt and the Health and Human Service Department to verify that notification was sent out? It also states in here that if within 10 days of a change, they have to resend out notification. So we kind of took a little bit of a step back and said, what are other routes that we could potentially do to still give out notification and potentially, contact information, whether it's for that owner's agent for, certain emergencies that would come up, or, if the owner is going to act as their own agent. One of the things that we started talking about is through our GIS system, which is now known as Beacon, to potentially have a separate indicator on a map that would indicate that this property is a TRH licensee, and they could then click on that individual parcel and get that specific contact information. So that necessarily wouldn't be anyone that's within the 300-foot area. It would really be anyone that has access to a computer, or even on your phone. The burden of sending certified mail, we also thought that how are TH owners going to do this? They're going to ultimately come to Land Records Department or to zoning and try to ascertain that information from us. And it sounded like it was going to end up kind of, bogging us down a little bit, because I don't know a lot of people that are going to be able to get that information that aren't readily familiar with how to use the Beacon program or parcel mapping in general. So it was another thought that we came up with. Ultimately, this TRH committee made a recommendation in the form of the resolution to have that 300-foot zone in there. But this is one of those option ones that we kind of flagged up that said there might be a better or different process that can be utilized. And Brian, if you had to go, did you have any other comments that you want to make on this? You talked about, having it as part of kind of a county website map that, that again, you could drop a pin on a parcel, click on that parcel, and then have all this other information as shown as far as the notification. So the license, the address, and the emergency contact information. And again, readily available to anyone that has access to the internet.
Yeah, correct. So most people should be familiar with interactive mapping websites at this point in 2024. The county has an interactive mapping website that we contract with, but we also have the ability to draw interactive maps ourselves, host them locally. We've got a few maps right now. But we could add a whole new map that is specifically to show where tourist rooming house locations are, as a business, showing those the contact information. And like you said, anybody with internet access could find this. It would basically be notifying everybody and not just people within 300 feet. And like you said, I think we need to remember that there's like 500 to 600 of these tourist rooming house situations here, not 50. It's a bit of a different number. And while the public should have the ability to, pull addresses into Excel and run a mail merge, I'm not sure all 500 to 600 property owners will be able to do that. And then yes, we'll end up working through that with them. So if we were to publish a map that showed where everyone is, showing their current information, it really kind of publishes that all at once and puts everybody, on the same page.
Yeah, and there'd be certain circumstances and situations where, you're talking about, just because I know this from other public hearing processes through zoning, where there, could be 40 to 50 individual properties within 300 feet of a TRH owner. If this was a large, chunk of land, you may certainly have, quite a few different certified mailing letters that would have to go out. So there was another thing that we kind of just thought there might be better and different processes. But thank you for staying on there with us, Brian, and kind of walking us through that. We're kind of jumping ahead a little bit. I think we can come back to this because this is actually as a separate agenda item. Because again, your recommendation as part of your resolution did include the 300-foot zone. So to make changes to that and potentially go with other options, we'd really need a motion to kind of change that, which is the next agenda item. So just keep that in your minds as we kind of jump back up to the front and kind of work through the other elements as part of this draft.
And just one more note, as far as the current language, our Beacon website does support people to be able to select their property, run a buffer 300 feet that would select those properties within 300 feet, print out a spreadsheet, and then run a mail merge, as most adults know how to do, right? So we do have the capabilities to support that to some degree here as well with our current mapping.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Madam Chair, I got a question real quick for Jay. Jay, do you have that new language then that you would propose for considering that motion?
No, it would really, the motion would be, I guess, whether or not we would look at other options and potentially not have the 300-foot requirement as separate certified mail notification. But again, I think,
So one of the things that came up too was adjacent property owners. But as to the point, let's go back to the beginning and we'll hit this on our way back and understand it better when we get there.
sure. Yep, thanks again, Brian.
And Jay, would you go ahead with the walkthrough, starting with definitions?
Sure. Well, I'm not gonna, I guess, read this line by line.
No. Just section heads.
Sure.
I'm assuming everybody has had a chance to read this. It's not 100 pages, so it should be doable.
Yeah, I guess my hope was that we kind of go through this, and if the TRH ad hoc committee members had questions or comments on those specific sections or any of the language provided in the draft, that we would, address them at that point. I mean, ultimately,
Yes.
the first couple of chapters, are the authority that gives us the ability to, propose this ordinance, the purpose and intent of the draft ordinance that you have in front of you. And then we have, then we kind of roll into definitions. So,
So basically, if anybody has a comment or a question as it relates to the recommendation, this would be a time to bring it up.
yeah, go ahead, Martin.
And my question or comment is in regard to the definitions section. And as it relates to further down in section 14.4-11, which talks about occupancy of 2 persons per bedroom, the definitions section does include the definition statement for bedroom as 1 or more beds. And I'm trying to understand how that would apply to, a large bedroom, which say had 6 bunk beds in it. They seem to conflict a little bit, and I'm wondering if this ordinance needs a definition of what a bed is in the cases of where you have Murphy beds or Haida beds, and whether that will cause problems in identifying occupancy.
Yeah, and that was addressed a little bit through the kind of the department workforce work group. So DADCAP and ATCP has specific definitions of what a bedroom can be. Specifically is kind of the cubic footage requirement, wall height requirement. So could you have one bedroom that has 3 beds in it? The answer is yes. But then when you go down to occupant and specifically the occupancy requirements, that is where the sewer system sizing as your private on-site wastewater treatment system would otherwise dictate the number of occupants you can have in that dwelling. So there is a little bit of a difference because you're kind of picking it from 2 different entities, ATCP and DADCAP, as well as DSPS, Department of Safety and Professional Services, to kind of come up with the crossover of those definitions.
Yep, I understand that. I'm just thinking that in the occupancy section of the ordinance, where it talks about 2 persons per bedroom, seems to artificially limit that, even though there is a qualifying statement to the sewer design. Just to a casual reader, I think it's important that we emphasize that it's the septic system criteria that's going that could be 2 persons per bedroom.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, I guess we'll
I don't
take
know,
that one
it's-
back to our, I guess we'll
I
take
don't
that
know.
one back to our team and kind of look at that because, yeah, I do see what you mean there. If bedroom says, one thing, but then occupancy says 2 people per bedroom. Yeah, it would be unfortunate if you had one large room where 4 people are staying because you potentially be in violation, so.
But yeah, we'll look for clarification of that.
Thank you.
And this discussion, just for the audience, this discussion is just for the committee right now. Yes. Okay, anything else in definitions?
I guess Eric from Sawyer County Zoning. Definition S is work in progress, trying to define what a valid sanitary permit is going to be. So still need to work on clarifying that.
Yeah, the quotations of the non-EH 115 form is just kind of a placeholder for us. We need to have some different wording in that, so.
Okay, you want to go ahead, Jay?
Yeah, next one, tourist rooming house license required. This basically is just what states that in order to operate a short-term rental or tourist rooming house, you need the license issued by the county, which is part of the Health and Human Service, county health officer. Then we move into application for the TRH license, is what that application is to have for the form, as well as the required information on that that form, which ultimately would be, to grant you your license.
Jay,
Yes.
under number 7 in that section says copy of sanitary permit, and then it's parenthetical if applicable. I'm assuming that means it would not be applicable if it was connected to a municipal sewer system.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you're going to have those instances, whether it's, in the city of Hayward or under some other type of municipal treatment system. Ultimately, then the county sanitary permit, you wouldn't have one, so we wouldn't be checking at that. And ultimately, I mean, there are some, blank sections in here. Those, because section numbers may change, because additional information is added, where you see in kind of number 9, number 11 here, those will be filled in if this ever, moves forward to a more formal draft or, approval of the draft. So, again, kind of just, placeholders for us to insert those sections when we have them available and ready for a more official publication of this.
Jay, number 10 there, and for you as well, Julia, what are any other information the county health department deems necessary? What would be an example of that? Oh, all right. Just real quick, Matt.
Yeah, I guess for any other foreseeable scenarios or situations where something that might be needed, I guess I'm not coming up with anything right off the bat, but
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah, this is one, Mr. Schuman, that it's a catch-all, because there are so many particular unique aspects of all of these different properties that we want to make sure that the county has flexibility to ask for additional information. But then also that a property owner can offer additional information that might not be specifically set forth in the ordinance. What comes to mind is the owner that mentioned the camera technology and those types of monitoring mechanisms. That's not something that is contemplated in the ordinance, but that may be something that Matt and his team want to consider. And so we need to have that catch-all. Also, keep in mind that anything that the health department would have to ask for, it deems necessary, has to be within the county's appropriate legal discretion. So if the health department asked for something that was totally outlandish and not connected or reasonably connected to this process, and again, the police power of regulating for health, welfare, and safety, we couldn't ask for that. It has to be within reasonable discretion. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on that section? We kind of move into 14.4.4 decision on the application. We had one highlighted here, and ultimately, I think I think Rebecca is still going to provide some additional information here to subsection B for the issuance. Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure where we left that, but I think that we needed to do some additional work in that section still.
No, this should be this is the added information.
Okay.
Yeah, we modified some language. Let me just grab that piece here. We modified the language that related to the statute under which the DACAP license is issued. So what this essentially is saying is that a county license could not be issued until the DACAP license was issued. Again, because we wanted to build in flexibility for staff and applicants, there may be things that are set forth in the application requirements that would be coming later. And so that flexibility is built in. This section says, yes, while we have flexibility, the county may not issue a county license until it has the DACAP license or it's issued in conjunction with the DACAP license. So the language you see here was my proposed final version. Certainly we can make more modifications if necessary.
And then kind of moving down to what would be I guess this would be actually subsection C. I guess I see that there's some formatting there that needs to change. Last go around we had with this draft ordinance was Monday, and that was one of the newer highlights here for reasonable information. The term reasonable is somewhat vague, so I think we were looking at potentially removing reasonable and just say information. And basically, if there was some type of, denial that information would be in the form of a law enforcement agency documenting numerous complaints and or information that would negatively impact health, welfare, and safety of the county. So I think we got rid of the word reasonable there.
Jay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Martin. I would suggest consideration of replacing reasonable with any, ANY.
I think that's a level of detail where the committee really needs to kind of let things go back with the folks that are writing the ordinance.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on maybe when this document gets to the next step. When all these individual words are ironed out. We're not really there right now.
It's not our job, by the way.
Madam Chairwoman?
All right.
I think,
Yeah. does
Martin, I
Rebecca
think
want to
the
weigh-
Phil Neese, I think the word, we went through like 15 words and they all come back to it's just information as required. And then anytime you say any, what does that mean? Or reasonable, what's reasonable to you is not reasonable to me, or then Doug's, any information he has in his file, maybe, 4 feet there too. So anyway, I would leave it as it is, but it was a good thought.
Then we move on to 14.4.5, which is the term of the license. This is specifically stuff that's already occurring with the current process. So again, just kind of solidified now in this ordinance form. We did have a highlight here for the renewal fee. And I think that was highlighted as to reference your fee schedule.
I think we were,
And
that's what it was. Yeah, we were gonna combine A and C, and then the renewal fee would stand on its own as a separate.
Okay. On 14.4.6, as far as inspections, again, this is stuff that's already occurring as part of the current process. But again, authorizes county health department to make those inspections. 14.4.7, as far as the fees for the application. Let me move into 14.4.8, which is the owner's agent. We did hear some comments at the beginning as during the public comment process relating to the 60 minutes. When we initially started, we actually had this as 30 minutes and we thought, well, that's really quick of a time because it takes more than 60 minutes from drive one side of the county to the other. I guess this would be one of those option portions for the ad hoc committee to decide, should there be a larger time allowed for an owner's agent to, potentially deal with issues that may arise. And again, an owner can be the owner's agent. Now, if the owner is, somewhere out of state or something like that, they would need to designate, someone that, is more of a local contact. And I guess I would just toss this back up to ad hoc committee, should it be 60 minutes? Should it be 60 miles? Should it be 100 miles? Should it be 90 minutes? Should it be an hour 20? Again, consideration for the ad hoc.
Yeah, this is a point of discussion. The 30 minutes came from another county's ordinance. That's where we took that from. But it's totally up to us. So from a committee standpoint, if anybody would like to chime in, please do.
I guess when we were talking 30 minutes, I can't get woke up in 30 minutes. So anyway, but I think 2 hours. By the time you get a phone call, you get up, let's say, just try to, I'll just throw out 120 minutes. I mean, you're going to have something. So, but that gives more time for the individual too. I would offer that, and I'm not, whether you want to do 90 minutes or what do you think, Matt? You're the man.
I mean, to have a time frame is good. It's just more so to have this in here that, if there is a situation that arises, the first step isn't that they're going to come to me or to our department, is that they're going to contact the owner's agent or the owner, whoever, one of the same. And then hopefully that by contacting them, that the issue will get resolved and doesn't have to go anything beyond that. And so we're trying to put the responsibility on the owner or its agent, and that the situation get resolved as quickly as possible versus them waiting 24 hours and getting a hold of me. And then by the time I'm able to look into this, the situation is long gone. So the first step is to have that owner agent, to be the first contact. So, I mean, whether it's 60 minutes, 90 minutes, I mean, we just got to have some sort of reasonable time frame.
How about 90? How does that work? Just so say we did something.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Well, my question is, so they need to live within that, I mean, they have to respond in a non-emergency within 60 minutes? Could you clarify? Because it doesn't say if it's a non-emergency or emergency or what they have to reside within 60 minutes. You're saying response time, but this is just saying residing. So I just think that should be clear, is because the one lady said, if you have to respond within 60 minutes, that you could be in the middle of something. You can't respond within 60 minutes. So I think you need to clarify for everybody involved. Are you expecting them to respond or just reside within that?
Yes. So where this comes from is it's in another section that's ahead. This is in 14.4.9, parent D, parent 4. I'm sorry, no, parent E, parent 4, where it talks about that the owner, and it actually should be owner or owner's agent, shall take reasonable measures to respond to any complaints within X amount of minutes after the complaint is received. So where it references it back where we're talking right now as part of the owner's agent, Again, if the owner is out of state, they need to designate an owner's agent that can respond to complaints and take those reasonable measures within a certain amount of time frame. So it's the section we're looking at now references a section later, so they're going to be the same time. It's just whatever time you think that needs to be.
And then who is going to regulate that as far as if you have a neighbor that says, I called this complaint in and you were here in an hour and 30 minutes versus 60. I mean, I'm just saying, like, make it reasonable because you're going to have the crazy neighbors.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
If you want to answer Stacy's question first, I just wanted to make a general comment about owner versus owner's agent from a legal standpoint.
The way I read this is that under 14.4.8, that's really more of a measure of distance. To say, as we had said, it's not like the closest person is out of state or even in Milwaukee or something like that. They have to be within a certain distance so they can respond effectively. And then the other section is more of a statement of minutes, and it's, you know, it says take reasonable measures. So I don't want to get buried in the idea that somebody's going to get called out on this at 62 minutes. I don't think that's the point.
No.
The point is that we just need to have some designation.
I'll remove all my previous comments, and I think 60 is as good as anything you'll come up with, so let's move on.
And Martin, you had a comment as well?
Yeah, I think we might be missing one thing that this could help with. And if we removed the 60 minutes and just said the agent must be a resident of Sawyer County, you could reasonably conclude that a resident of Sawyer County would be more aware of this ordinance and other Sawyer County ordinances and things that are more of a local influence and deal with the response time in the further sections. So rather than trying to decide 30, 60, or 90, to respond to the chair's question, I would have preferred the 30, but I can accept 60. But I would also suggest we consider just saying the agent must be a resident of Sawyer County.
You know, if you live in Hayward, it isn't that far to Cable, and I don't think we could actually do that, Martin.
I mean, Washburn County is 6 miles that way.
Yeah, we got 6 miles over the other side and outside of the city of Hayward. I think that's, we did talk about that originally at one point, that the person would have to be, but that's putting undue, I think that wouldn't actually work. So anyway, that's my comment.
Well, if the 60-minute is just as undue as saying a resident of Sawyer County, it's still drawing a geographic boundary of where that person, the agent, must reside.
Yeah, but if I live in Stone Lake, I can get to Coudray faster than if I live in Hayward. So why would you define or confine something to a boundary of the county versus a time frame? I mean, we're kind of experiencing this right now with some other committees as far as sheriff's departments being able to take patrol vehicles home as well. And it's a time thing more as a boundary.
Yeah, I don't want to get too stuck on this. As I said, I think it's a guideline. It's just that we're trying to state that you've got to have some responsible person that lives within a reasonable distance.
I think 60 minutes is good and we should stick with that. But maybe you want to vote amongst the subcommittee here.
I'll entertain a motion if someone wants to make one.
Can I jump in here, please?
Oh,
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Madam Chairwoman. Couple things. Number one, the intent of this section is to set forth the requirements of an owner's agent. The owner's agent has to reside within that time frame. This is not saying that the owner's agent has to be in a certain place within 60 minutes. Point number two, throughout this document, when there is an owner's responsibility, the owner's agent may act on behalf of the owner. So that is why it's very important to set forth the specific requirements of who can act as an owner's agent. Jay is absolutely correct that an owner can be their own agent. An owner is not required to hire someone else if the owner meets the requirements within the ordinance. In terms of the making a motion to accept that, I think it would be more efficient to make a note of this point, and then at the end, you can roll all of those points into one motion, and then one action item rather than doing them piecemeal, but that's just a recommendation. That's not a legal requirement.
Yeah. No, thank you, Rebecca. I think that's good advice. We do have another agenda item to talk about making a motion, so we'll hold off till that.
I do still have a question though. So I think that is a conflicting statement because one point says that you have to reside within 60 minutes. And then under the notification of neighboring properties, it says that the owner shall be responsible to respond. So there's a reside and response, that those are the two terms that I think are getting confused here. So in the notification of neighboring properties, if they have to respond within 60 minutes for the owner, so that's where I want clarification is it, do you have to live within, the agent has to live within 60 minutes, but it is actually stating here that the owner shall take responsible measures to respond to any complaint within 60 minutes after the complaint is received. So that's where it's conflicting. And I think that has to be more clear, because if I'm an owner, I don't even respond to my kids' complaints within 60 minutes, let alone somebody that's staying in my place. So I think we have to be more clear on that. Is it the agent has to reside within 60 minutes or do they have to respond within 60 minutes? That was my point initially, and I think that it needs to be clarified here.
Okay. Jay's taking a note of that.
Got a note.
Okay.
So we'll kind of circle back to that one. Because yeah, I do agree with Stacy's comment that does have some conflicting aspects there. And then we kind of get into the first mention of the 300 foot for the contact information. So this is found in subsection E as part of 14.4.8, the owner's agent, the contact information. The owner shall provide a current telephone number for the owner's agent to each owner of any land within 300 feet of the TRH property in accordance with the section herein, and that section again would be further referenced. Again, this falls in line with 14.4.9 sub E for the notification to neighboring properties. This was what we had kind of discussed and kind of circled back to it now as far as potentially other options that might be available for this. Ultimately, we do have this as a separate agenda item to actually kind of vote on. And if there are any other motions that need to be made or votes that need to be done at that time. I don't know if you want me to kind of go over that again, or if there's any additional comments on that portion of that 300 foot line.
The only additional comment I would make is that in the meeting minutes from October 19th, it was captured that our discussion at that point mentioned contact information sharing is vital for this process to be successful. So how it's done, I guess, is a detail, but the idea is that there's got to be some responsibility put on these owners to contact people. If we can do it through the system, then it becomes a pull and not a push. Does the committee want to recommend a different measure other than 300 feet? Like maybe adjacent property owning owners should be notified? Or, you know, it's up to the committee if we want to do that, or if it wants to go into just being like I said, a pull situation where the neighbors have to go look for themselves.
I don't, this Phil, I don't kind of want to make it situational, but the problem with 300 feet is with some of our subdivisions that are within the county and that are being built, you could have quite a number of people you would have to contact. And that seemed a little unreasonable to me. I thought that at least the adjoining property owners would have to be notified. That was adjoining the property or abutting, whichever is the best word. But because, you know, if you, I hate to use Northwoods Beach, but you know, if there are three, you can't believe how many property owners you have to notify by certified mail in Northwoods Beach. And there is a lot of short-term rentals there. So, but I don't want to make it situational either. And I don't want to make it to try to make an exception either. That's not a good way to do this. So I just offer this out in discussion.
Yeah.
Rebecca, what is the cleaner legal term? Adjoining or adjacent?
Adjacent, immediately adjacent.
Am I immediately adjacent if a private road separates me?
Yes.
Am I immediately adjacent if a town road separates me?
Yes.
These are questions that I would have.
Yeah. I would say we for sure would need to add a definition to clarify what adjacent means.
Immediately adjacent.
We could add a clarification either in a definition or in this section that states the owner shall provide each owner of real property that immediately is adjacent to or abuts the TRH property. And Jay, we can go back and look at how, whether the ordinances identify notice provisions with respect, you know, as to if there's a public road. Generally speaking, a public or private road is not going to separate contiguity. But we can build that in to, again, whether it's in this ordinance or in the definition, to make that, to capture that intent of the committee. So,
Yeah, and
Okay.
the reason why I bring it up is, I mean, does this committee want, you know, I understand it is probably a good idea to notify those adjacent property owners, but, you know, think of a lake setting situation. You have a property owner on one side, you have a property owner on the other side. Do you want notification to that property owner potentially across the town road on the back side? Because there could be a distance that you could implement that's not 300 feet, but say 67 feet, which a town road is generally 4 rods, which is 66 feet. So then you would hit that person across the road. Or you could make it 65 feet where that person isn't hit across the road. And things to consider, because it is something that, you know, if we go this other route, we are going to need to solidify with this committee.
Well, I think we have to decide first if we're going to go the other route. So then if we are, then it's up to staff to figure out what we know what we mean by, if I know what I mean, if it's across the road, they should be notified. And and let staff work out the details of that. So I would make a motion that we would change that verbiage from 300 we have it several places. The 300 is used, I think. But anyway, I would make a motion to that effect.
Okay.
Would your motion then include immediately adjacent?
Yes, yeah.
I would second that then.
Yeah.
wait, time out, guys. Can we just make a note of that and then do one motion at the end?
Yeah, that's where we're going.
That's where we're going.
Okay.
Okay, but when Mr. Schuman seconded, my lawyer, you know, red light went up. So thank you.
Okay, so let's just, like I said, we put this on the list. We're going to come back to it at the end. We'll continue going through the document. Right now, we're at 14.4-10 room tax.
Yeah, 14.410 room tax.
Question?
Yep.
So that's Martin. So if we change all of these in one motion at the end, how is a committee member supposed to vote if they object to some and approve of others?
Interesting.
You would make an amendment to the motion.
That's a very good question. Certainly at the end, you can separate all of the items into separate motions. If there are, you like some but not the others. As Mr. Schuman just indicated, you can make or offer an amendment to the motion. My concern about doing it piecemeal throughout, as we discussed, we're in a discussion only right now technically on the agenda. And so we shouldn't be taking any action where we are on the agenda right now. So that's why I want to make sure we get to the right place in the agenda before we.
I apologize, Rebecca, for making a motion. I won't do it again.
You're forgiven, Mr. Neese.
So I support the process, but in terms of further discussion on this point, the chair asked for opinions on this, and my opinion would be to keep the 300 feet as proposed in the document. And I don't know how to convey that when we get to the motion on the full ordinance.
Okay, we'll discuss that when we get there. Thank you, Martin.
So yeah, 14.410 was room tax. That was added in there again. That's, just stating that they need to comply with the room tax requirements as per Wisconsin state statutes. And then we get into occupancy. This is where, again, we initially had some kind of, option routes to go. At this point, those option routes are potentially becoming less viable from what we've kind of seen through our office. I know Eric Wellauer has had several conversations with DSPS, which again is Department of Safety and Professional Services, which kind of regulates the POUTS systems. We had one of those, and I was on record and quoted before saying it's kind of creative math where we could potentially look at commercial sizing and using the appendix of 383 in conversations with SPS or DSPS, I should say. They are now looking at omitting that appendix and actually getting rid of that because they view it that it should be as residential sizing, where if your sewer system is sized for 2 bedrooms, that means it is sized for 4 occupants. We'd also seen other counties do some other things where they allow a number of bedrooms plus 2 additional people, but that is nowhere found in code. And if we went that route and allowed for additional occupancy for TRHs, there's nothing in code or statutes or anywhere that supports that. So that is where we kind of look at straight residential sizing as to how is defined in code. I don't know if anyone else wants to offer more to that, but that's how we have this proposed right now. It would be the number of bedrooms as per the sewer system is sized. The state then recognizes that for every 1 bedroom, it is 2 occupants. So not necessarily looking at what the actual dwelling itself has for bedrooms or beds or whatever the case may be. It's specifically looking at what your sewer system is sized for. And that would ultimately determine the number of occupants that could be there.
That's correct. And just to remind the committee, that was really the verbiage that we originally started out with, which was we were going to follow state statutes. And secondarily, that option for commercial sizing was tabled twice by the committee. So, I feel like we are on track to be supportive of this state statute as it is written and as it applies. If there's any other discussion on that, we can have it now. Okay.
I guess I'll just add to that. I'm going to try to change some of the wording instead of saying non-residential to go with any other technologies, designs, or methods recognized by the department. And maybe Rebecca can help out as well to make sure that what's written is legal. And I guess that's all I got, is just to change non-residential design to technologies, designs, or methods recognized and approved by DSPS. That allows for the potential for commercial sizing, metering, or anything else that comes up in the future, where we don't have to change this ordinance when state changes appendix or code or statute.
Yeah, and if you were to do something as far as commercial sizing, that would be something that would need to be further approved by the state, then, correct? Yep.
Okay. Next section.
Next section we have is 14.4.12 tourist rooming house regulations. This is where we had taken in some of the already kind of common practices. Is that correct, Matt? If you want to go over any of these here, kind of toss that one up to you.
Yeah, the one thing in A here, I may recommend changing. So just trying to hear back from DACAP is changing smoke and carbon monoxide detectors to alarms, from a technical standpoint. Fire extinguishers is not something that we require right now as a licensing, for agent. But I believe in the future may be a requirement as DACAP goes through, their rewrite of 72. So it would, and it's always highly recommended that we have fire extinguishers in the facility. The only change there in B for fire extinguisher would be where it says, which shall be maintained on an annual basis. I don't know if we want to go to that extent, so I would omit that part. What we would do is, as with part of our inspection, is that we would check the fire extinguishers and make sure that the dial reads that it's green, meaning it's charged, it hasn't been used at any point. And then a lot of times we'll look for either a date or just kind of check the extinguisher itself to make sure that it hasn't coagulated and is not operational. But again, would omit maintain on an annual basis.
Matt, would you recommend adding charged or functioning to a 10 BC fire extinguisher? Or some
I
other
think it's-
terminology that clarifies that?
Yeah.
Well, there's a dial.
Right.
However, we can word, because I can have a fire extinguisher that's empty and it's at my place.
Right, but then it would read empty though too.
Right, but you don't say that. It just says I need to have a fire extinguisher there.
Function.
That is, yeah, I guess, yeah, we can work on that.
Yeah.
Functioning is good.
And some of these other kind of, I guess, under this subject or the chapter of tourist rooming house regulations, these were some of the other commonly common complaints that we receive, whether it was individuals lighting off fireworks as part of a TRH owner, whether it was the pets that, gotten loose and went on to someone else's property, whether it was, parking within the easement road or down a town road. So that is why we put some of this in here to, again, have the information out there to the TRH owner that, these are some of the things that we get the common complaints on and are really trying to address. So, if there's any other comments on these, please let us know. And we do talk about, the secondary habitable structures. This is in conjunction with some of the ordinance amendment processes that are going through the zoning department right now. And that would be something where in the event that you had an existing multi-dwelling development where you had existing dwellings on one lot and now you want to rent multiple of those dwellings on one lot, the proposed ordinance would be that you need to be granted a conditional use permit to operate that as a resort. So that is where it's getting to as such by the Sawyer County zoning, unless permitted as such by the Sawyer County zoning and conservation department. So again, if you want to rent your secondary habitable structure and you weren't already acting as an existing resort, but you had existing dwelling units on one lot, you again are going to need to be granted a conditional use permit to do that use. And that would be the only instance where you could then rent that secondary structure on the same lot.
This term does not refer to those tourist rooming house license for those that have, say, 3 rentals that are adjacent to each other, they're all on separate lots.
Correct.
So again, tourist rooming house, you can have up to 4 units or 4 rentals, say adjacent to each other, but on separate lots. That's fine.
Yep. Then we go into enforcement and violation.
I had a question.
Yep, go ahead.
So Martin, back on paragraph D for pets. Do you feel that shall maintain control of pets at all times is effective for pets that would continue, say, more than one time a day, be unleashed and roaming, and the adjacent landowner says, hey, control your pet, and control is just, well, I'll come and get them and then bring them back?
Yeah, I think that's a level of detail that we don't need to get into right now, Martin, but thank you.
And I support the concept of controlling pets, but most pets that I've seen are not leashed and not in control.
If my dog is in the yard, in my yard, and she's not on a leash, and she's going, and that would be controlling my dog. If she left my property, it's not controlling my dog. And then Lily should be on a leash or have my whistle that I blow and she would run home. So
Yeah, I would agree. I would think that is what it's kind of getting to maintain control of the pets, is that those pets are maintained to the TRH property. That's actually probably not a bad idea, that relating to control of animals, renters or any persons using the TRH property shall maintain control of pets at all times on TRH property? Within TRH property boundaries.
We gotta be careful how we word that though, because then it shouldn't be interpreted as people can't take their pets off the property.
Right, and walk them down the road or something like that, yeah.
leash law.
Or otherwise leashed on public land, yeah, so we'll,
Maybe
we'll
when we
circle
look
back
at
and
the
make a note on that.
ordinance, the pet ordinance, that might really have that language for us. Yeah, it does cover it, I figured.
So going on to then enforcement and violations. Owner's obligation I have highlighted. Did we correct this one, or was there still additional info that was needed on that one? Rebecca, do you remember?
What you have should be the corrected version.
Okay. Yeah, I think this was the new language here.
I believe so. Yeah, because all the ones that that I was tasked for doing, I had sent and should be incorporated into this version. Yeah, and so do you want me to just touch on this one, Jay, where to kind of further explain my comments that are in the margin?
Up to you in the chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, so owner obligations, there's been lots of discussion about making sure that the owners and hosts have, a vested interest in the conduct of their renters. And so this was, this provision essentially says that the owners become liable for any fees or forfeitures that the renter may be issued. So for example, if a renter has a dog that is running off property consistently and the renter is issued a citation under the animal control ordinance, that renter says, you know what, screw you, I'm leaving in a week. I'm not going to pay this county citation. And the renter doesn't, then that citation would be the obligation for that would be placed back to the owner. And few comments on that point. We have to be very careful how we structure that transfer of liability from a renter to an owner. And the other thought was that risk then that is shifted, or that obligation that is shifted to an owner for incurring liability on behalf of the renter, can be addressed in the contract between the owner and the renter. And so an owner can protect its interest and minimize its liability within that contractual relationship between owner and renter.
Thank you.
And then, yeah, I guess moving on, unless there's other additional questions from the ad hoc committee on that. Then we kind of moved down to another one that we've highlighted, and I think we still did need some storming on this one. I think we did change it a little bit though, but ultimately is the calls for service. And this might be a good time to kind of ascertain some information from our sheriff as far as, I mean, are your deputies receiving a bunch of calls related to TRH properties for, be it noise complaints or other complaints like that?
We have in the past. To my knowledge, we have not recently. I didn't look that information up here recently, but having an overview pretty consistently, nothing of recent.
Thank you. Yeah, so if there's any comments or questions on that, like I said, I think we still had maybe a little bit of changing that we'd want to do for that, because one of the aspects that we kind of looked at least is the first version that's now strike through. That's not a word, but struck. Thank you. We had, you know, what is a valid complaint? Are people that are just, you know, upset that there's a TRH next to them going to, you know, bog down Health and Human Service Department, bog down the Sheriff's Department to try to get, you know, 3 valid calls and complaints to potentially, you know, revoke someone's license for rental. So that was one of the things that we at least kind of flagged and highlighted, that we may need to change, alter, modify this one a little bit.
Jay, I thought that this had been modified to the word excessive instead of 3. So excessive complaints for noise or calls for service.
Then I think when we further brainstormed on Monday, it was, okay, well, what's excessive?
Yeah, and that I may be recalling incorrectly. I thought because I thought the original draft had 3, and then we changed that, or it was decided to change to excessive. But now if we're back to 3, and this is something for the committee to decide. If the committee wants to use a hard number of 3, it can. The concern that was talked about at our staff level was, you know, a neighbor who doesn't like the renters will just simply call 3 times. You know, what is excessive? Excessive may be 2 if it's 2 very serious or not very serious incidents. I don't know. Again, that's up for the committee to decide what level it wants to use. And again, if any, you know, if the committee doesn't want to have you know, a calls for service statement in the ordinance, it doesn't need to. It's not a legal requirement. But I believe this was something in the committee's resolution, so that's why it was kept in here for more discussion.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, it seems like it clarifies it at the last sentence. 5 or more calls for service within 1 calendar year may result. So, I mean, I think you have that clarity in kind of what is excessive. You have 3 in a month or 5 or more in within a year. But also, can you maybe add that you'd work with the Sheriff's Department, or how? Because if it is just one person, but mean, at our office, we get callers that are repeat constantly. So sometimes they just have issues and then they call. So I think that it would maybe working on that a little bit. I think it reads really well right now and it's a good definition, but is there a way, would you like to see them, like, would you like to see Matt talk to you about, do we need to revoke this, or would you want the relationship of working with him in case it is a neighbor just with mental issues calling repeatedly or something?
And we do work with Matt, and in the past, we've communicated with Brian and Matt on issues in the past that we think are a joint issue. If it's relative to rooming houses, I think there was one time on Round Lake where we communicated regarding one. Otherwise, it's pretty consistent with falling under the rest of the laws and ordinances there, where it kind of takes care of itself. And I think the way it's written there, I think it's pretty clear, at least for starters, from our perspective. And when we receive the complaint, typically it's going to be usually after hours, or even if it's during the day, we try to do our best mediating, documenting, and then working with Health and Human Services to take care of it from there.
Yeah, the more I end up reading kind of that section, it is a call for service that is verified by the county, which again could be a joint decision, whether it's a valid and verified call for service or complaint. And then it even says that you may suspend or revoke. So there is some discretion in how that is currently worded. So
Right, just because somebody calls 5 times doesn't mean that they're automatically getting their license suspended.
And hopefully this is the exception, the way exception.
Right. And we would definitely need to be building a policy and procedure kind of behind the scenes on that so that we can make sure that we're moving forward in the same respect with all of these.
Yeah, so we're fair and consistent all the way across the board.
and then I have a hand raised from the phone number of 3874.
Is that Cheryl
It's either Cheryl or Gary.
or Gary?
You'll have to unmute yourself, or maybe I can ask to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go, Cheryl.
Okay, I've been trying this about half a dozen times, so I'm finally getting through. I sent an email to Lynn to look at it because I'm not getting through. Anyway, as I'm looking at this, the whole intent is to try to throw the complaints are going to the agent of record on it, whether it's the owner or an agent acting for the owner. And now you're turning around and sending everything on to the county. And I thought the intent was to try to get the sheriff's department and fire department and whoever else may be included in this out of the loop and have to have these complaints filed to the agent. And then does the agent turn around and say responsibility is to report all of these into Health and Human Services, or how does this work?
Let me take that. Okay. This is Julia Lyons. I can take that one. One of the things is behind that we will be putting forward is really what we would want people, neighbors who have a complaint against the owner or the property, the tourist rooming house, is to really connect with that agent or the owner or the agent's owner's agent, first. So we will be putting together, how do you contact, what do you do? And if we receive complaints, we will ask if they have gone through that mode of connecting with the owner's agent. Oh my goodness, tongue twisted. So yes, these calls for service would be something that would be more extreme, where they couldn't get a hold of the owner's agent, and then would proceed potentially to a call for service. So again, we are hoping that is very minimal that would be coming forward.
I understand that. But in doing that, are you throwing the onus back on to the person who's calling and complaining about someone because they're setting off fireworks at midnight, okay? Or at 2:00 in the afternoon. Now, they are supposed to be calling the agent for the property, for the tourist rooming house. How does that complaint go into the 3 calls or the 5 in a year? Or does it have to be something really egregious that is really, bothering the neighborhood?
Well, there's obviously some work to do as far as how we keep track of all these. And this has been my dilemma all through being an agent, is that how do we record this information? How do we document what is a valid complaint? What is just somebody that is watching every tourist rooming house neighbors move, and then they step 1 foot over the easement and onto their property, or just those calls that are, weekly. And again, having this in place, again, if this is decided what we want to do, we'll have to create those policies and procedures to handle them. But part of it is also education, informing that the owners and the agents that this is going to kind of be the way we handle complaints, but also informing the community as how this will work as well. So putting information out on our website. We have a complaint form right on Health and Human Services that goes, and you can click on that for any complaint for human health hazards. And then just on that page, we would have to kind of further educate, making sure that the complainant is taking the correct steps and going about making a complaint. So obviously informing them that step 1 is going to be this, contact the agent. Step 2 is going to be this, 3 and 4. As a last resort, they're going to call the sheriff's department. We don't want to tie up their services any more than we need to, but it's going to be a process of educating the public on how to handle these types of situations as well.
And I also want to reference under definitions, call for service means a call or forwarded to the Sawyer County Sheriff or their law enforcement body. So I think that clarifies it. It's a call to the sheriff's office. It's not a call to Health and Human Services.
Nor to the agent, nor to
Right.
the owner's agent.
Right.
Along those lines, I have a question on what constitutes the response from the agent. Obviously, different situations are going to call for a different or more immediate response. If some of the renters are whooping it up on the deck and they're shooting off their guns into the air, you're not expecting the agent to respond to that situation in person. So the agent is going to have to realize at what level their responsibility is. If it is a simple thing like, their kid that's staying over there, he cuts across my backyard every night on his way to the creek. Well, that's something that can wait till the next day, but people shooting guns on the deck obviously cannot. So and then who is validating these responses? If the agent is called, is he writing down then at 12:05, they were shooting guns on their deck, and then I called the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department had to respond to that situation. And then the other ones about trespass or animals, so that there's some follow through on the filed complaints.
Yeah, and that's part of the process of, if this wording goes through, then we have to kind of define what those limitations are, or
Right.
what is.
Distinctions.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So it is not clear. It's not easy. That is why I am looking for everybody's knowledge and guidance on this, because this has been my struggle all the way through, because most of the time the calls that I get as an agent aren't agent related as far as licensing goes. It's civil issues as trespassing and fireworks and easements and parking and stuff like that. It has nothing to do with me issuing a license or an inspection or anything like that. So where do I document it? The place where I currently have a place to record that information is in our agent program, but I don't feel that that's the right place, because that's not agent related. And so we need to create a mechanism to keep track of that. And so, yes, there is work to be done on this section.
Okay, thank you.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, I support this concept here and I appreciate the staff working forward on it. Just in a note as you work forward, I'm trying to determine in the case where there was a suspension or a revocation of a license, when would that take effect and how would that affect a current renter of that property? And you can deal with that in the process, but I think that should be clear in how the workflow is designed.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
And then the next section is 14.4.14, which is the denial, suspension, revocation of the tourist rooming house license. And this information was somewhat taken from the other chapter that Health and Human Services already has. So this is Article 4. They also have Article 3, which specifies the routes in which suspension, revocations, what's the other one? Suspension, revocation, and denial would go to. So ultimately, it would actually go to their committee of jurisdiction, which would be the Health and Human Service Board. So that is spelled out there for you, Martin. I don't know if you read that section or if you had questions about that section, but that was already included language that's already as an adopted article for HHS. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel with that one.
Yeah, I did read that, Jay, and I appreciate that. But I'm just, that's a process. And if there's an appeal, how does that affect the current renter? Does that owner has a contract, an obligation to the renter to fulfill the term of that contract? But if you've got a 25-day contract and they've had 3 valid halt of service in the first week, is there an eviction proceeding that goes forward if the appeal is denied?
No, it's a really good point for us to make sure we have process for behind the scenes as we look through that. If there's calls to service that are that egregious, I'm not sure what all is written in those TRH contracts, but as a owner, you may not want that renter there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, any other questions on the document? The reason I'm asking is because, is that Cheryl?
Yep, I just have one comment. I think that you will find that 95% of the people are going to be doing a very fine job with their tourist rooming houses, all right? And the VRBOs and everything else. You're going to have, just like everything else, you're going to have a handful of people that, the reason why we're even meeting and coming up with these regulations. And you will find that some of the places that rent are kind of known for what, being the place that you're going, and you're going to have as many people, 24 people, it doesn't matter how many people come into a 2-bedroom, because they're known for that, because they don't watch it and they don't maintain it. So it's going to be critical that I think some things are going to have to be called in directly to Health and Human Services, not going to the agent, because the agent is not going to care because they don't care. I mean, we have places on the Chippewa Flowage that I can tell you that, can maybe house 6 people, and probably they're closer to 26 every week, and they need a parking ramp to get things in. And they've got, obviously you've addressed the issues of additional occupancy with RVs and tents and stuff, because we have places on the Flowage that do that. And they're notorious for it, and they do it every single week, and they're known for that. So you're going to find a handful of people are going to be there, but I think some of these things are going to have to be directed directly to the Health and Human Services Board, not going to the agent, because the agent doesn't care. They're just in it for the money.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, and on that same note that's kind of the big point of having these ordinances, is to put a lot of the onus back on the responsibility for the guests that are staying there and the owner and the owner's agent. Often, many times when I've had communications regarding a complaint, as first question I ask is, have you talked to the owner? And often, now this is coming secondhand, but what is relayed to me is they say, yes, I've tried to talk to the neighbor, and the mentality is that, the guests can do whatever they want. And we got to get away from that. And so we got to, again, put the responsibility on the owners to make sure that the guests that they have there are guests that are obeying the rules that are out there and not being able to do whatever they want, whenever they want, because they're only there for a week. Yes, I understand people are going on vacations and having a good time, but yes, the neighbors also have rights too, and they don't do just anything and everything that they want to do. So again, just having these in place puts a little more responsibility on the owner.
Okay. All right. Well, we've been at this a while, so I want to offer the committee a very short break. Let's just take 5 minutes, come back here at noon and give ourselves a chance to think about what we've just been through and what our next steps are going to be. Okay, thank you.
That's whiskey.
All right, we are back online after our short little 5-minute recess there. So ultimately, we did work through the kind of introduction of the draft ordinance. Now we're on to number 9, which is the consideration of a motion. We have that here as for the contact information and notification to neighboring properties. And I guess, you know, I'll somewhat default to Rebecca here, but if there are other motions to be made, can they be made now, even though it's not as a specific agenda item, or would that be something that would need to be addressed as a future agenda item?
Are you talking about motions, a motion to modify what's the text of the ordinance now, or things?
Yeah, but not specifically related to the contact info, which we, you know, definitely have as an agenda item. But if someone wanted to, I guess, amend another portion, I guess those would almost just be as general comments, because I would envision that, you know, we would bring the ad hoc committee back at least one more time.
Oh.
Maybe not. Maybe that's ready to move it forward.
What I would do, Jay, I think because item 9 is specific with respect to that contact information, we can, you know, act under that item number 9 with respect to that specific item. The additional revisions, so I have like on my list the, you know, the 300, well, that's the 300 feet is the adjacent, the owner's agent versus agent and the 60 minutes provision, like that other type of clarification that we do under item 10. Because as part of consideration and a motion to approve, the committee is modifying what it's approving. It's essentially it's a larger umbrella in which they.
Sure, I get that. Thanks.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that, let's say today, the items that we got that we've talked about, and there's motions, the 2 that are on the agenda, end up getting passed. A great deal of what was internally here that we were talking about, basically is staff work and not really committee work, in my opinion. And, you know, whether we should change this a little bit, or Rebecca work to say, oh, you can't say that. And I'm under the impression that whenever we do, hopefully today, we forward this on to the committee of jurisdiction, they will be holding public hearings and we'll be working through. Is that the way the process works?
Yes.
And so at that time, if there's something to pick up, but I hate to see us coming back here to spend 2 more hours on minutia. It's all important, but I guess that's my point.
One of the things we said originally when we were talking about scope of this committee is it's not to write the ordinance, it's to recommend. And like I said, this has been a great discussion. It's borderline as far as how deep we want to go into these details. But overall, the thing we need to think about is, does this reflect our recommendation? Is something missing or is something in conflict? Now, the 300-foot thing, that is in conflict because we said 300 feet. So we have to talk about that. The 60-minute thing, I think we should also talk about. Is there anything else, is what you guys need to think about? Is there anything else that is in conflict with what we recommended as far as the direction that this is going? Okay,
Okay,
yeah,
reside versus respond on the agent.
reside versus respond. Is that what you said?
Yes, on the agent. Those two different ones there.
That would probably come with number 10.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. So, Madam Chair, I'm ready, if we're on number 9, I'm ready to make a motion that we strike the 300 feet within that, and then we add immediately adjacent or abuts. Am I saying that right? Abuts to the TRH property. That's my motion.
Is there a second?
I would second that with the amendment of adding what's the proper word?
With posting to the GI, to Beacon.
To GI, the county's beacon
How,
process.
yeah.
Yeah, so she,
Well, it would be as part of a county website. I don't know if we could necessarily get it on Beacon, but there would be a separate map feature that kind of looks like Beacon. And again, I mean, you do have a motion with a second with potential an amendment.
So I would amend my motion to include what Phil mentioned.
Okay. I do think we, need to double check a little bit with legal, because it sounded really good in theory. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if that is any type of violation of rights, because there would be public
if
information
it is, she can strike it later.
to anyone.
We're not gonna do
Yeah, this
anything,
is-
it's illegal.
Correct. This isn't the final decision on this. This is just the direction.
Yeah,
from the-
to include and consider that.
Okay, so we
Motion.
have a motion and we have a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you. That was Martin.
Item 10,
Yeah, so item 10, consideration of a motion to approve draft ordinance to committees of jurisdiction discussion action. So where we're at right now is if we had no more open issues and we might want to move this on, are we close enough to that point as a committee? Or do we want to talk about what other possible next steps might be?
or do you want to
Well,
see
I-
the cleaned up version that we come up with the motion that you just made, as well as some of the other comments that were made, which we definitely wrote down as department staff to clean up?
Madam Chair, do we have to clarify what you mentioned about this reside within 60 minutes or? Because it seemed like we're all over the place with that.
It does. Because we had in the actual recommendation, 30 minutes, we do need to address that.
I make a motion to change it to 60 minutes or 60, wherever it is within the distance. Isn't that what it says on that line?
Minutes is a time, unit of time.
So that's where the
Reside
cost-
Oh, you're right. It does on that one. One place is distance, one place is time. Use 60 in
One
both.
reside, right, it's one's reside and the other one is respond. They're two different places, but fairly close.
I also think it's important, and maybe that's, as Phil calls it, minutia, but somehow to clarify there that what constitutes a valid response by the agent? Is it, again, is it just going to be based on each circumstance, or is it a qualified response by the agents to say, okay, well, I'll go talk to him tomorrow? There has to be some way of validating what constitutes that response. And if the response is, this guy's got guns, then I'm calling the sheriff's department. That's their response and it's documented. But if it's like I said, the kid goes across the backyard, then the agent, his response, documented response, so that it's not misconstrued as no response. It's stated that yes, I'm going to go speak to them in the morning about that trespass issue across the back of the property. So there has to be a way so that the complaints are validated and so is the agent's response.
I really don't, I guess you're right, but I don't know how you do that, to be honest
Wow.
with you, because my response to you may offend you, or my response to you may be fully satisfactory.
But ultimately, that response is going to be looked at by one of these two departments. So what constitutes the proper response?
Point of order, we don't have a second, so you can't be in discussion.
Right.
Point of order, we don't have a second, so you cannot be in discussion.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll second it for discussion.
There we go.
Okay, do I need to say it again then?
No,
No.
it's okay.
Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman.
I can't hear.
Could you repeat the motion, please?
I don't even remember where we were at, for God's sakes. I've been at this so long.
It was the 60 minutes
My motion was to go with the 60 minutes
instead of 30.
instead of 30. Because in our original thing, it said 30, so I'm changing them to 60.
Yeah, and I second that. And that includes the owner's agent must reside within 60 minutes of the property. And they must respond within 60 minutes. But I do like Laura's question of what is a valid response, and maybe legal could identify that for us?
Yeah, okay, so first off, I think your motion, when we get done with my comments, it needs to be just clarified that you want the agent must reside within 60 minutes of the TRH property. Second component is the owner, so it could be the owner's agent or the owner, has to respond to a complaint within 60 minutes. So those two 60s are different. We're talking about two different regulatory items. Then with respect to what constitutes a sufficient response, right now our language is take reasonable measures to respond. That is a very broad term, and it implies a whole lot of discretion, not only on the part of the owner, what does the owner think is a reasonable measure to address, and then on our staff, what does the staff who is interpreting and enforcing this ordinance think is a reasonable measure? I think from a drafting standpoint and from a general legal standpoint, you cannot anticipate every single possible instance of what is a satisfactory outcome. Even something as broad as shall satisfactorily respond to the complaint. Well, what does that mean? We could go on for a long time in terms of what does a particular meaning, what does it mean? So the reasonable measures was used to try to encapsulate the use of discretion in the greatest amount of discretion by staff and by an owner in terms of properly dealing with that complaint. If you want to heighten that standard to include something like the owner shall rectify to the county's satisfaction, the owner shall resolve the complaint within 60 minutes to the county's satisfaction. We could add elements like that. You could add an element of the owner shall satisfy the complaint to the complainant's satisfaction. That would be a really hard threshold to meet. And it would be very hard, I think, for our folks enforcing the ordinance to make a determination of whether the neighbor is satisfied. We're just, that would open up a lot of unknowns. So we have to find a delicate balance of making sure that there is discretion allowed, but that the intent of the owner's got to resolve this problem is met. And so I guess the next question for the committee would be, how specific do you want to be? Do you want to use a standard like to the satisfaction of? Or do you want it less specific where the greatest amount of discretion is going to be at the staff and the owner level? That would be my question to the committee.
On looking at the document a second time or a third time,
Fifth time.
fifth time, I'm not finding the 30 minutes.
It's not in there.
It's not in it.
It's not in there.
So that changes, I guess, what we need to do here. What we can move this, does this really need to be clarified by the committee, or is this something now that goes back to the staff to have them figure out from a working standpoint what they need to do? Go ahead.
So is my understanding for number 10, where Phil's motion would just be an amendment to approving the draft that we currently have.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that so that we can move forward and we're not making multiple amendments. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Point of order, I don't think we're on 10 yet.
Yes, we are.
Yeah,
Here we are.
That's what you seconded.
but it's as part of, it is part of 10.
Oh, okay.
And the question, I guess, comes back then is, does this ad hoc committee want to see a cleaned up version of all the discussion points we had today? Or do you want us to make the changes and then ultimately you have, a potential consideration of a motion to move it on to committees of jurisdiction? Do you want one more kick at this as a cleaned up version from what we discussed? Or do you think we're ready to move to another committee of jurisdiction and hold a public hearing?
I believe we're ready to move to another committee of jurisdiction. I think we got as far as this committee can do because we're getting into how to implement this in the nickels and dimes. And I think
That's what you signed up for.
huh?
Yeah.
That's what you signed up for.
No, I didn't. I
ahead,
didn't get
Stacey.
paid this month.
I respectfully disagree, Phil, because I don't want to send it on to another committee if we haven't clarified the things that we asked to be changed and the people on the phone asked to be changed. So I think I would like to see another revision just so that we're sending a clean version of what we have approved as a committee.
I support the committee getting another version.
Cheryl's had her hand up for quite a while.
I don't know if she never,
I su-
you still want to talk,
Okay,
Cheryl?
I support. Yeah, I support a revised, an updated version of what we've discussed today.
Sure. So I don't know if we need to make another motion, because ultimately that motion would be to move it on to a committee of jurisdiction. So with that, I think we could probably move to number 11, unless you want to vote on
Close
that.
out this
Okay, sure.
motion of something.
There's a motion on the floor that should.
I was on 60 last I knew.
Yeah.
Is that okay? You want to recommend 60? I guess we need to do that before we pass on. So
The maker of the motion could withdraw the motion.
I withdraw.
Or you could
Okay.
amend the motion.
Okay.
To include the 60, and then that amendment to the motion could include direction to staff to bring the cleaned up version back to this committee. And then
Okay.
they would obviously have to agree to that amendment.
So, and before we get to a vote, I'm hearing a lot of support for that, but I also want us to consider the time frame because I really would rather not go another whole month. Typically we had been doing monthly meetings. If we're this close, can we get this done more quickly than waiting until a whole nother month has gone by?
Answer is probably yes, but I don't necessarily have the calendar up as to what other dates you would want to meet. This committee did kind of make a motion way before we started that we would hold it the last Thursday of every month. That's also what's viewed on the website as to when the TRH ad hoc committee meets. So it gets a little bit sticky. I know you don't want to wait, but it does get a little bit sticky internally if we change those dates.
Okay.
What do
Again,
you
then
need
also
public
looking at
notice?
calendars.
2 weeks?
Okay.
You need 2 weeks for public notice?
24 hours.
Yeah, really only 24 hours.
And then I'd said as soon as you can get it done within all of the professionals that
called
are
me.
working on it.
The next, if it goes to HHS, that meeting is, yeah, so it's coming up quick.
Can we not go with, rather than waiting a whole month and so forth, that as when staff has the cleaned up version,
They'll notify.
that they'll notify the chairman at her discretion will call a meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. Ultimately, looking at other committees of jurisdiction to get it onto their calendars, that last Thursday of March or April
Yeah.
public hearings actually still lines up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, because we'll never make it to
Right, so even if we
HHS.
held a meeting in the middle of March,
It's not.
committees of jurisdiction still aren't going to hear it till the middle of April.
Correct.
So even if you hold this committee meeting the end of March, then we're still in the middle of April. So
Okay.
it doesn't really matter too much for us.
That's very good clarification. Okay, so let's kind of regroup where we're at right now. We're on number 10, so we're going to consider a motion for the next steps to include, and I don't want to paraphrase for anybody, but the next steps to include reviewing the cleaned up version of the document and then scheduling our future meeting for the last Thursday of March. Somebody needs to make that motion.
So
So
moved.
moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those approve, say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right, how about a motion to adjourn?
You can do it, you know. Right. Yeah.
I just want to say something as far as timeline with all this. If this is something that ends up getting passed the next couple months, just how it works on our end for agents is that our renewal process begins, for licensing begins in May, but all the licenses expire on June 30th of this year. And so ideally, I guess if we were to go forward with this, looking at, say, for an example, if this is how we want to do it, a 3-year approach to implementing these ordinances. The first year probably being education, second year being enforcement, third year possibly being revocation of a license, for example. But if this were to go through, it would be suggested that we try to do so before that renewal, because people this summer that are renting out are gonna start booking for next year. And so it'd be good before we get into that busy season that we can put together this information and the resources and getting it out to those owners and agents. And have everything we're gonna need as far as the new application, what's that gonna look like, our county application, and all the supporting information that they're gonna need. So there's gonna be a lot of work, even if this were to get passed today, a lot of work on our part to be able to get ready for, to implement this. And so just kind of keeping that in mind and timing as how we go forward with it.
Right, and that might be something that committees of jurisdiction and or county board would have as an implementation date of the ordinance. Because again, I can see this, not even potentially getting to county board until June, July. And that's a very realistic possibility. And by then, how are you giving notification out to these TRH owners? So that might be something as far as further discussion, whether it's here next meeting or whether it's committees of jurisdiction or even county board as an implementation date of the ordinance.
Right.
Could I ask to have that added to the agenda for the March meeting?
Implementation timeline?
Yes.
Okay.
And with
All right.
that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. You have a second?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
You bet.